a lot of that going on. Okay, what have we got left, Ron? We've got this stuff here, haven't we? Oh. Yes, this is Hawaiian koa. Okay, Ron, so a little bit of maple, and then we'll do some koa.
I forgot what it was.
It was the look of sheer panic.
The funny thing with koa is when you hit it hard, it doesn't like it that much. So it's more like what I did with the grand concert, where I started hitting it very hard, strumming it very hard. At one point it starts to compress, it starts to sound nasty. With this one as well, koa doesn't like it that much, but for anything else it's a really nice flat response, very wide, so real nice for melody play.
Started to play, this gentleman down here started to purse his lips. So I take you like the koa one, yeah? Yeah. As Ron said, an awful lot of complex overtones with koa. It takes that maple thing and you get more bottom end and actually a little bit more high end as well. So there's an awful lot of frequency range there. And when you really do dig in, some of those frequencies get lost. And that's when you don't get the best out of it. Of all the woods we use as well, it's the one that changes the most over time. We estimate that a koa guitar takes a good 5 years of being played to really start to sound somewhere near its potential. So if you hear one that you like when you're in a store, you should buy it, because in a few years' time it is going to sound absolutely amazing. It just keeps on developing and developing and developing.
It's also a good excuse for your wife, like, honey, I need to play this guitar. It will sound better. So, yeah,
or
you
know, a good excuse for the husband as well.
Yes.
Depending on who plays. Maybe you both play and you can share it.
Yeah.
No. Quite a possessive bunch just towards the back there. Noticeable. Okay.
No sharing here.
So that's wood types covered. Did everybody hear the difference? So you can imagine if you start thinking about the different wood types and the different body shapes and play some different guitars made out of different woods and different shapes of guitars, the one thing you can't change is the sound that comes out of your fingers. Do we have any non-guitar players here this evening? Anybody who doesn't play? Right. This is where it sounds like we've all gone off into space or something. People's fingers sound different. And for 99.9% of people, when you're playing the guitar, your fingers, on either one hand or maybe both hands, are making contact with the strings. It's not like a piano where you're hitting a key and it's triggering a hammer and it's hitting a string. Your fingers are actually on the strings. And that's where the story of famous guitar players comes from, that you can give famous guitar players equipment to another famous guitar player and they still sound like themselves. They've got the equipment that makes it easier for them, but the tone is still basically theirs. And a lot of that comes from the way you play and the fingers. That's the thing you can't change. So some people's fingers create more treble when they play. Some people's fingers can be quite mid-range. So it's important to try different wood types and different body shapes to actually see which one works best for the sound that comes out of you when you're playing. And that's why we make them. Anybody have any more questions?
I've got a question. Who owns Orange Ford Fiesta? Is it possible to move it, please? Yes, so that's
all
my
right.
question.
I've never had that one before. That was a new one. Anybody with any other questions? Anybody else? No? Very well behaved indeed, I must say. Right then, in that case. Yes.
Do you use sustainable forestry?
Yes. We, I think it's fair to say, are right at the front of this. Bob Taylor spends most of his time these days on wood ecology, wood supply. That's really that's Bob's interest. We have gone so far. I mean, if you don't mind, if you've got a couple of minutes, we can talk to you about ebony, because that's a really big thing with us. We use ebony on every single guitar that we make. So if you buy a Baby Taylor or a GS Mini or a 100 series or presentation series or whatever it is, it will have an ebony fretboard and an ebony bridge on everything we make, from the bottom to the top. That's what we like. Now, Bob got a phone call a few years ago from one of our partners in business, a company called Medinta, which is a wood supply company. And he said, I think you need to know this, but we're running out of ebony. And that's a big thing for us. We use it on everything we make, and we make a lot of guitars. So Bob went off to actually go to the source and see what the issue was. And the place that you get ebony from is Cameroon. So he went to Cameroon, and there were 2 mills there. And he started talking to the guys who worked there, talking to the companies, trying to find out what the issue was, whether it was that we were just using too much ebony, or what the problem was. And he found out that actually the issue was, of all the ebony that got cut down, only roughly about 10% was actually being used in terms of what we wanted to do with the wood. And he asked the guys why that was. Now, when you think of ebony, most people think of it pure, almost black wood, with no streaking in there at all. But actually most ebony has streaks in it. You can see there on the fretboard. It's a little bit lighter in the middle. And some of it can be quite extreme. But for the guys who were cutting down the trees, and when they opened up a tree, if they found streaks like that, that tree was only worth 10% of the value of a black tree. So it used to get left. They would cut it down, open it up, and if it wasn't pure black ebony, it was left. 90% of the wood that was being cut. So Bob said, well, how about, here's a thought, what if we just paid you the full amount for anything we can use? What would you do? And they said, well, we'd start using that. So to cut a very long story short, we bought one of the ebony mills. And it's now we partnered with Medinta, the wood supplier, and actually we run that ebony mill. So as far as we're aware, we're not going to run out of ebony anytime soon. We're now using anything we can to make sure that we don't run out. We're also replanting the ebony. So anything that we use, we're planting more trees to replace that. Now we're never going to see this. This is several generations down the line. And there's no guarantee that at that point that we will even still have the mill or that the land will still be owned by us, but Bob is particular about this. There will be ebony trees there. So yes, we're very much at the forefront of sustainable woods. Absolutely. Any more questions? Yes, sir.
You were talking about fingers, hands, and different tones.
Yes.
Could you explain a bit?
The honest answer is we don't know the science behind it. We think it's down to wood density. We think it's down to bone density, or something to do with that. But essentially, that's the best guess we can make of it. But if you gave a guitar to 3 or 4 guys, got them to use the same pick, and got them just to play some open position chords and a few notes, you'd hear a difference between the different guys. And it's just the fingers on the strings. So whatever the science is, we haven't worked it out, but it's definitely true. There was a thing recently on Facebook, I don't know if you saw it, but Zach Wilde, the metal guitar player, big guy with a beard, used to play with Ozzy Osbourne. Well, a guy called Eric Johnson played his guitar rig. Eric Johnson, for those people who play Guitar Hero, was Cliffs of Dover, if you didn't know. And he sounded just like Eric Johnson. Playing through a completely different guitar, different amp setup, different pedals, sounded just like Eric Johnson. I'm pretty sure if you gave Brian May a different guitar and some different amplifiers, he'd still sound like Brian May. It's just the way it is. So we think that's what it is, but we definitely know that people produce different sounds when they put strings on the strings. Yeah. Yes, sir.
I've got an 812 CE,
Mhm.
and the reason I bought that one was the sort of environment that I played it in.
Okay.
I predominantly play in my own studio,
Mhm.
which is very acoustically damp.
Okay.
I tend not to plug in unless I'm actually doing a recording.
Okay.
So I can play around with it a lot anyway.
Mhm.
You didn't mention at all anything to do with that in terms of the choice of the body size. Is the clue in some of the names, auditorium and the likes, as to the kind of environments that they're suited to or designed for?
Not really, no.
Just personal choice.
It is entirely down to personal choice, and again, that sound that you produce when you actually play the guitar.
Right.
So no, we don't make them, or an orchestra is not necessarily designed for a bigger room.
Right.
We just think it sounds bigger, it sounds more like an orchestra as opposed to a smaller ensemble, so that's why the name of the guitar is that way. But no, we Bob's known for his science, but he's not that good. Any more questions? Yes, sir.
Why do you prefer everything for the bridge and fingerboard, not as opposed to say a rosewood?
This is a Bob Taylor personal choice. The first thing is he loves the look of it. He loves the feel of it as well. It holds a fret very, very well. We don't glue our frets in place at all. They get pressed into place. And that's one of the things at Taylor that's actually done by a person. It's not a machine who does that. Although I do believe they are working on a machine to do that. But right now it's somebody actually using an old-fashioned press and pressing the frets into place. So he loves the physical appearance, he likes the sound of it, likes the fact that it's a tough wood but it's not too tough on your fingers. And because obviously the bridge, it looks better if the bridge matches the fretboard, we go for an ebony bridge as well. Any more questions? Well, in that case then, I suppose...
How about the sandwiches?
We should...
What's on it?
What's in the sandwiches? Oh, the sandwiches in the Ford Fiesta, that's what I want to know. Has he driven up with the sandwich? He's eaten them already. Okay, well, there's going to be some food here, obviously there's some drink. We have some guitars here for people to play, and we're going to take maybe a 15-20 minute break, and then we'll come back and talk about things that are just about Taylor. So, neck joints, pickup systems, and then Ron will do his wonderful T5 demonstration, and you will all go, wow, that's amazing. I have to have one. Okay, that sound good? Laser cutters. Laser cutters that we use are accurate to 1/1000th of an inch. To put that in the real world for you, that's about half the thickness of a sheet of A4 paper. So all day long these things cut the same thing to within that kind of tolerance. Gentleman at the back there is just trying to work it out. He's like, oh, how much is that? Okay. Now, as you may have noticed, we use a bolt-on neck system. And the neck pocket that we and Bob created can only be accurately cut by using those machines. It has to be super, super, super tight with very, very little tolerance. The reason that is so important is it means that we can set up every single guitar perfectly before it leaves the factory. Taylors are famous for their low action, for their great playability. It was one of the things Bob wanted when he decided he was going to create his own acoustic guitars. There were two things really he was looking for. The first thing was he wanted a guitar that cut through a little bit more. The other famous traditional companies, one of them is very much mid-range, the other one is very much bottom end. And to really make them cut through, you've got to have a fantastic technique and know exactly what to do. And if you can do that, they will sound great, there's no doubt about it. Bob wanted a guitar that would do that automatically if you weren't such a good player, that it would just sound fantastic. And he wanted a guitar that you didn't have to fight as much with. He couldn't realize or couldn't work out why his acoustic guitar was so much more difficult to play than his electric guitar. Why did that have to be the case? The machines that he's pioneered the use of allow us to make these super consistent guitars and allow for very, very accurate manufacturing, and then have allowed us to create a neck system that means that we can make sure the guitar leaves with a great action, and then we can adjust it very, very easily as well if you have any issues along the way to get that action back. So every single Taylor has a bolt-on neck. The people who have a Taylor already, please do not worry. Yours does not come apart this easily. There's a bit more involved. There are actually 3 bolts that hold the neck in place. See there? There are 2 that go into the heel. See that there? And then there's one that goes through the top. In here, and these are glued in place, we can't take them out to show you, but there are wooden shims as well. There's one that sits there. and one that sits there. Why are they important? Well, these can actually be used as a pivot point to move the angle of the neck. Why would you need to move the angle of the neck? Well, let's say we've made this guitar and the top is 1/1000th of an inch thicker than we would ideally like it to be in a perfect world. That machine was operating right at the outside of its tolerance. It's just a tiny bit thicker. And then let's say the bridge is just a tiny little bit thicker as well, just that 1/1000th of an inch. So you've now got the thickness of a sheet of A4 paper on top of ideally where you want the strings to leave from on the saddle and the bridge. As a guitar player, believe it or not, when you pick up the guitar, you would feel the difference. The guitar's going to fight a little bit more, the strings are going to be a little bit higher. Our system allows you to adjust the neck angle so that you can get the strings exactly where you want them to be. So let's say that's the case. A little bit too thick, a little bit too high. What you want the neck to do, to counteract that, and I'm exaggerating here, you don't want it to move this far, but you want it to go that way to pull the strings down just a little bit and get the action exactly where you want it to be. With the system that Bob pioneered, it's pretty easy. I'm an idiot and I can do this in about 15 minutes. Our trained guys in the States, we've timed one of them doing it at just over 3 minutes or thereabouts. So it's pretty quick. These guys don't even take the strings off, so they would loosen the strings. They put their hand inside with a little wrench and they would take the bolts out of the neck and the neck just comes off. They take the shims out, put some different shims in, and these guys can do this by sight. They don't need to measure anything, they know which shims need to go in to get the neck exactly where you want it to be. They put the neck back on the guitar, they put the bolts back in, they string it back up, hey presto, it plays absolutely perfectly every single time. Now if you've got a more traditionally made guitar, that's a much more involved process. Chris can no doubt talk you through it. But our guitars, so every single one, before it leaves the factory, we make sure the action's perfect, and then when it's out in the field, and humidity and temperature get at it, and the wood starts to move a little bit and the action starts to change, we can service your guitar for you, so they all play as well as they possibly can. Also, if you have unusual requirements, if you're a blues guy, and you like to play a lot of slide, and you want a load of relief in the neck and a different neck angle for that, we can do that for you. That can be taken into account. So you can understand why Bob is so impressed by the neck system that he designed. And that's on everything we make from a GS Mini up. It's not in the Baby because there's not enough room to actually put this system in there. The guitar's too small. But if you have a GS Mini, 100 series, 300, 500, 700, 900, you've got an NT neck. That's what it's called. Okay. Any questions on that? Right, I'll pass this round so you can have a look at it. We'll start there, if you would go that way around.
Are you not talking about ES?
I'm going to talk about ES, but we'll just kind of do it. Pickup systems are another thing where Bob and the team have pioneered how we actually amplify acoustic guitars. I was talking with this, or with a gentleman about this a few minutes ago. Pickup systems, if you look at the history of acoustic guitars, are fairly new. You know, these guitars have been around for a long time. And then, of course, as bands became popular, the problem of how you actually amplified or get the acoustic sound out of the guitar and into a stage situation in particular came about. So for those of you who remember, in the 1960s, when you start to see bands appearing on TV, you'd have a guy standing as still as he could, normally with his guitar up here for some reason, which I never worked out. They always had their guitars up here, trying not to move in front of a microphone. Now, when Ron was playing before, you'll have heard the difference when he moved and the guitar moved in front of the mic. They're very directional. So you had a guy there, stood in front of his microphone, trying not to move, to get an acoustic guitar sound into a mic, into some kind of speaker system. And then you had feedback issues as well. Over time, pickup systems were developed. And the most famous type of these pickup systems is called a piezo system. Now you people all look like you have better things to do on a Friday night and have social lives, so I'll forgive you if you don't know how that works, but I'm going to have to tell you anyway. A piezo system is a thin bit of crystal, thin sliver of crystal. It sits under the saddle, so it's underneath the saddle there. Strings go over the top of the saddle. When you play the guitar, the vibration passes through the saddle onto the crystal. You get an electrostatic charge, and it gives you an acoustic guitar sound. That's how it works. We use piezo systems. We still use them, traditional style piezo on some of our guitars. What we weren't so keen about was that we didn't really feel that it picked up the entire sound of the guitar. Because the pickup is under so much pressure, I think, and it is a think here, I think it's about 80 pounds worth of pressure. It's actually under, it's compressed. So if you try different piezo system loaded guitars, or try ideally the same guitar with different systems in, you don't necessarily get the different sound of the guitar and the different wood that you're using. It doesn't pick it up as well as we would like. So we developed a thing called the expression system. The original version, which you'll hear when Ron does T5, was magnetic. About 3 years ago, a little bit longer maybe, our pickup guy, a guy called Dave Hostler, came up with a new idea for a piezo system, and he just thought, you know what, we've been doing this wrong. There's a better way to do this. And that is what we now call ES2, Expression System 2. And that's a piezo system that instead of fitting underneath the saddle, where it's compressed, actually sits behind the saddle. So when the guitar's going round there, you'll see the pickup from the back of the guitar. You'll see that it actually mounts behind where the saddle is, and there are 3 sensors, 3 transducers that slide through the bridge and actually rest against the back of the saddle. So although they're on the saddle and they're getting the vibration, they're not under much pressure, they're not compressed. Also, don't know if you know this, but when you're playing an acoustic guitar, the saddle actually doesn't go up and down. It goes backwards and forwards. So with the system fitted there, you get the full movement of the saddle going backwards and forwards, being passed into the pickup system. And then we feel you get a more natural acoustic sound from the system. It's also much higher output than the old magnetic system used to be, and you can actually adjust the sensors on there as well. So there are 3 little screws in there, little grub screws, and if you have an Allen key, and it's the same size as the Allen key you would use for adjusting the bridge on a Fender guitar, you can move the sensors backwards and forwards. So if you like more bass automatically, you can just tighten it a little bit, push the sensor onto the saddle a little bit more, and then when you go out live, you've still got the controls on the top of the guitar, which are volume, bass and treble. So you can still adjust, but you've automatically tuned the system for what you prefer in the first place. They're pretty difficult to break. I think I'm the only person in Europe who's managed it so far, but I did manage it. But you really have to be very physical with it. Small movements make a big difference. Any questions about the pickup system before Ron shows you what it sounds like?
Can they be retrospectively fitted to the...
Yes, it can. It can. We've just actually shipped some jigs out to some of our UK technicians, some of the guys we've actually trained in Amsterdam. So yes, it can be retrospectively fitted. Please don't ask me what the cost is, because off the top of my head I can't remember. But it can be done, yes. Any more questions? Anyone? Bueller, anyone? No? Okay, Ron, you gonna play?
Yeah.
Cool.
capo. So it is very. I'm using the Helix on the floor here, and I just have some an EQ on there and a little bit of reverb on that side. So that's all. And I have the controls in the middle here. So this is my volume, this is my treble, and this is my bass control. So I have now it's flat basically. So I can also take a little bit of the high end out. So have a or add a little more. So very cool.